Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who want to do more than just get through the week. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband Evan.
Good morning.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us on this wonderful Wednesday.
Yeah.
Since it's Wednesday, we are going to talk about being centered. Being centered is living out of the essence of who God designed you to be. Not who God designed your neighbor to be, not who God designed your parent to be, your best friend, anybody else. Just you.
Yeah, what was that quote? Were we together when... Oh, I think it was from the Jordan Peterson book. Like, compare yourself to yourself from yesterday, not to who someone is today. That's one of his 12 rules. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that. You measure up to you and God's standards, not all those other guys.
Exactly. So this week, we are talking about patience. So today, we thought we would talk about patience with ourselves. Kind of a hard one, at least for me. Like, I am my own worst critic, and I'm not a very patient person. Like, I have worked on being more patient with other people, and now I'm starting to work on being more patient with myself.
Yeah, and I was trying to write these things down, and I was like, yeah, I can kind of get this, but I was like, I think Liz would really resonate with this.
Yeah, that would be me.
Have you ever said to myself, oh, I'm just not learning patience fast enough?
Probably. I could totally see that being something. Why aren't you more patient? Come on.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it's a problem for, not just what quality would you...
Self-critical people?
Yeah, well, I think we're all self-critical in some ways. I was trying to think of, but just for different ways. Like the things I was thinking of with being impatient with myself about is developing and, like, you're wanting to be productive, right? Like work and have some work output of some kind.
Yes, but I'm very impatient about myself for that.
Yeah.
I get very impatient with my human limitations. That was one of the ones that I wrote down.
Okay.
Like, I'm not good at... And being ill has really forced me to practice this, because prior to getting sick 8 years ago, like, I was like, what is wrong with you, body? Like, why do you need food? Why do you need sleep? We don't have time for that. Come on, get your act together.
Yeah, and see, I've not done that, but I've struggled. Like, I have the bad self-talk when I see flaws, things like sin issues or I guess inability to do certain things, like,
right.
Why don't I just automatically know how to change the brakes on the car? And why isn't it just the easiest thing in the world? Stuff that I have to learn how to do. I get impatient with myself too.
Yeah.
I've got to look this stuff up. I've got to try to do it a couple of ways that don't work before I figure out the way this do work, or I don't have the right tools. Can I make the tools I do have work? Or do I go spend some money on the right tool? That stuff drives me nuts. I get very impatient with myself there. And that's kind of like half at me and half at just kind of the system, right? Yeah, the circumstance. But it's all inappropriate, isn't it?
Yeah. I was thinking about that definition that we read on Monday. It's out of the Complete Word Study Dictionary for the New Testament, and the word is Macrosomia, which is the Greek word for patience in Galatians 5. And it says Macrosomia means to be long-suffering. It means forbearance, self-restraint before proceeding to action. It is the quality of a person who is able to avenge himself yet refrains from doing so. Macrosomia is patience in respect to persons, while hupomone, endurance, is putting up with things or circumstances.
Oh, so both.
And yeah,
we're two slightly different Greek words.
Right. But we're lumping them together and talking about both this week when we're talking about patience, but I was just thinking about how, I think as Christians, we talked about this in the self-love week. As Christians, we sometimes get so focused on how do I love others? How do I be patient with others? And we neglect how do I be more patient with myself? How do I love myself, Yeah.
Because we're supposed to deny ourselves, right? And take up our cross and stuff.
Right.
But I think we confuse that with ignoring ourselves.
Right.
And if we're not growing in a certain area, or, especially with sin, if it's like, if that becomes a struggle that's ongoing, let's just keep that a secret. Yeah, I think there's this tension of being patient with ourselves and waiting on God, being still, like we talked about on Monday, but also, the whole idea of the CSCs in this show is to remind us of our daily due diligence and our daily kind of connection with God and our certain spiritual responsibilities. Those things are work, and we do those every day. We patiently do them, or we can frantically do them. Like, it's just so subtle, but we're still working. We're not sitting back in the hammock, and that's not just patience doing nothing either.
Yeah, you're not just sitting there being like, all right, I'm totally going to develop, whatever skill or personality trait or fruit of the Spirit. I'm going to work on that.
Yeah, I think
later.
Your example yesterday of the walking the path in Candyland and going through, because there's shortcuts in Candyland and you can get the card to go all the way almost to the end, but walking the path, I think that's life. And that's evidently so important to God, to live a certain amount of years and learn things along the way and grow. It said Jesus Christ himself grew in wisdom and stature, and that's our example, and he's God.
Yeah.
And we don't understand what all that means. But so, yeah, being patient with ourselves is going to be accepting how we learn in the world. And it takes time.
Yeah. Well, and I think, being a parent really brought this into focus for me. Learning that when kids feel stressed, when anyone feels stressed, it prevents us from actually being able to learn. And so if we're impatient with ourselves, or if we don't have margin in our lives, like we were talking about on Monday, we're in a place where we're preventing ourselves from growing. We're going to be stuck. Yeah. And I think, at least for me, I used to get stuck in this cycle where I was just impatient with myself for not doing whatever. But then that prevented me from being able to do whatever, the impatience there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thinking about how kids learn patience, and learning is fairly stressful. And so that's normal. Right. But being in a situation where the adults or the other people that can sort of have enough calm for everybody, for the kids, like appropriately, is so important. Like as a parent, like I know when we're freaking out, then the kids are freaking out and nobody's learning anything or being very productive, and it's a bad spiral.
Right.
But with God, he's infinitely calm, he's infinitely patient, so he's drawing us along at an appropriate pace. And so it involves trusting the process too.
Yeah.
We're not going to think it's quick enough, but evidently it is.
Right. And we need to work on giving ourselves that grace, that patience with ourselves to, have margin, to that room to grow. Just like a plant needs room to put out its roots. If we're freaking out all the time, there's no room for us to grow.
Yeah, right. And building margin is a great way to practice patience. Building in some time when you first wake up or throughout your day or before bed, this time of it feels like nothing, but it's silent prayer or it's meditation or it's just stopping with the media or whatever. Right. Building in these times of where we have to be patient and trust that God knows what he's doing when he asks us to slow down.
Yeah. And if you're like me, you probably need to work on your self-talk a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And not be so critical of ourselves. Because when we are critical of ourselves, it does send us into fight or flight,
Yeah. And can you tell we're reading that Jordan Peterson book? Because that just made me think of one of his other rules was treat yourself as someone you're responsible for taking care of or something. Yeah. And so sometimes it's easier to be patient with other people, especially like kids, right? Like, they'll learn eventually. They'll learn to walk eventually. They'll learn to talk. But we need to extend that same grace to ourselves and care for ourselves, and to realize that, we need to allow the time that it takes, whatever that is, the time that it takes to fill in the blank, the time that it takes to bake a cake, the time that it takes to learn how to change the brakes on the car, the time that it takes to learn something or read a book or meditate for 10 minutes. It takes 10 minutes. So, but you can't meditate for 10 minutes in 7.5 minutes. You got to take the full 10 minutes. And that's the hardest thing for me. I always want to try to cut corners and shave off time for some reason,
Have more time later in life.
Yeah, that's right. And so patience with myself looks like breathing a little bit. Coming like we talked about on Monday, being still more.
Yeah, being still and giving ourselves grace.
And realizing that it takes practice.
Yeah.
Practice patience with little things. Build a little bit of margin into your day this week. Try to do it every day. But you're not going to like build in hours and hours of margin. But maybe try to build in 5 or 10 minutes a day of margin.
Right.
And practice that. And then see what happens.
Yeah, and like we talked about yesterday, patience is fruit of the Spirit. So it's not going to be something that we can do ourselves. We have to keep running to the Lord and saying, all right, I would like to be more patient with myself, but I need a little help here.
Mm-hmm.
As always, pick whether today is going to be awesome or not, whether you're going to strengthen those neural pathways to look for good things or to look for bad things, to look for margin or to look for overwhelm. You can pick. And what you look for is what you're going to find. Mm-hmm. Increasingly. Because the more you look for it, the more you find, the more there is. It's just a downward spiral. So, or an upward spiral, depending what you're looking for.
That's right.
We love you guys, and we're praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been listening to the show and sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share it. And come back tomorrow, and we are going to talk about being patient with other people.
Having restraint with others, like that definition says.
All right. Have an awesome Wednesday, you guys.
See you later.